Welcome to Bourbon Hunter Anonymous. Before we step into tonight's shadows, I want to make something clear about who we are. Here at Bourbon Hunter Anonymous, myself and my husband included, we collect, but we do not hoard. Every bottle is opened, every pour is sipped, and every good find is meant to be shared with friends, family, and fellow bourbon lovers. We believe bourbon is about community, cheering each other on, grabbing a second bottle for a friend when you can, celebrating someone else's win even when it isn't yours. We don't flip. We don't tear each other down. We don't compete. We connect. But I can't help being curious about the people who don't play by those rules. Because somewhere along the way, bourbon stopped being just a drink and became an obsession for some. Tonight, we're stepping into a world where rare bottles aren't just collectible. They're coveted, fought over, hidden, hoarded, and sometimes even stolen. From secret online trades and whispered back-channel deals, to camping out in freezing parking lots and heated arguments over unopened bottles, we're peeking behind the curtain at rivals, betrayals, and psychological thrill that drives people to scheme for whiskey most of us will never even touch. So, grab your glass, if you've got one nearby, and let's wander into the shadowy, sometimes absurd, always fascinating world of bourbon collecting. Because in this world, friendship, ethics, and reason are optional. But the bourbon? It's sacred. Some collectors will do anything for the rarest bottles, even betray their own friends. Friendships shattered over a single barrel. Trust broken over a limited release. Tonight, we're diving deep into the dark psychology behind bourbon obsession. The kind of stories nobody talks about in polite circles. The deals that quietly go wrong, and the moral lines some people are willing to cross just for a taste of exclusivity. In this shadowy world, a bottle isn't just whiskey, it's status. It's power. It's proof that you were there first, that you were willing to chase, to wait, to hoard while everyone else slept. And sometimes, it's the thing that drags people into arguments, betrayals, and even ruin. This isn't just about bourbon. It's about human desire, temptation, and the thin line between passion and obsession. Welcome to Bourbon Hunter Anonymous. Bourbon collecting is rarely just a hobby. For some, it becomes a full-blown obsession, the kind that eats up your time, your money, and sometimes your social life. Some collectors treat rare bottles like holy artifacts, chasing allocations with the kind of relentless determination usually reserved for treasure hunters, or people trying to get the last roll of toilet paper during the pandemic. Lines form outside stores hours before openings. Membership groups trade secrets like mafia families exchanging intelligence. And insider connections are cultivated like tiny bourbon black markets. You think you're just buying whiskey? Nope. You're navigating a jungle of spreadsheets, Discord groups, and secret storage rooms that look suspiciously like a cross between a wine cellar and Fort Knox. These aren't casual notes in a tasting journal. Collectors meticulously track every release, every barrel proof, every batch number, and every warehouse tier. Some even record where their bottles live, labeling racks like they're organizing a high-stakes military operation. And yes, we've seen people brag about having secret stashes, a private vault of Pappy Van Winkle, or Buffalo Trace antique collection bottles that could probably fund a small country if liquidated. One collector even admitted to me, not naming names, because lawyers, that he once considered installing a biometric scanner on his wine fridge. That's right, a fingerprint scanner. Because apparently friendship and trust are optional when rare items are involved. And why? Pride, greed, fear of missing out. Those tiny emotional triggers combined into a perfect storm. Pride tells you, you are the person who has this. Greed whispers, you can flip this for a fortune. And fear of missing out screams, if you blink, it's gone forever. Just ask anyone who chased the 2025 E.H. Taylor bottle of bond release. The sheer adrenaline of securing a single bottle could double as a cardio workout. Collectors describe it like hunting unicorns in Kentucky's rolling hills. Except the unicorns are aged whiskey and the hills are now Zoom forums filled with people sharing panicked screenshots of allocation emails. But it's not all spreadsheets and frantic line waiting. There's a social cost. Rivalries flare, friends are sidelined, and casual small talk often devolves into heated debates over whether the next bottle release is worth it or just another bragging point. One forum post, I swear this is real, warned newcomers. Don't start collecting. It will ruin your relationships, your bank account, and possibly your sense of self. Which, if you ask me, sounds exactly like Bourbon Hunter Anonymous therapy notes. In short, collecting is no longer just about savoring fine bourbon. It's about obsession, human desire, and the tiny thrill of holding something forbidden in your hands. And sometimes it's a little funny if you survive to tell the story. Because you've spent 3 hours defending your warehouse spreadsheet to a stranger online, poured your soul into Discord debates about who deserves a barrel, and installed a fingerprint scanner on a fridge. Well, at least you can laugh. Or cry. Sometimes both. This obsession doesn't just live in spreadsheets and secret storage rooms. It has real-world consequences. Rivals flare like sparks on a barrel full of high-proof bourbon. Two collectors who were once friendly might suddenly find themselves sizing each other up over a single Pappy Van Winkle release, turning what was supposed to be a shared passion into tense, competitive warfare. Hoarding isn't just a quirk, it's a lifestyle that can spark arguments between friends, siblings, or even spouses. Imagine family game night turning into a full-blown debate over who gets the last bottle of William Weller. Yes, it's happened. Betrayals are another, darker layer. Friends, trusted dealers, or insiders sometimes cross the line in pursuit of the ultimate bottle. A quiet tip shared in confidence becomes a secret auction. A promise swap turns into a sneaky grab. And suddenly, the so-called community feels more like a shadowy society with its own rules, and penalties for breaking them. These stories rarely make headlines, but they circulate in hushed tones across forums, Discord servers, and small bourbon gatherings. Every whispered tale adds a layer of intrigue and danger to the hobby, making it feel like stepping into a secret society where admiration and obsession blur into something almost forbidden. The identities of the people involved are usually kept anonymous, which only heightens the suspense. You start to wonder, who's hoarding more than they admit? Who's willing to break a friendship for a rare barrel? Who's playing a game we don't even know the rules for? For viewers, it's like peering behind the curtain into a world where bourbon is more than a drink. It's a trigger for human desire, greed, and drama. And of course, a little absurd humor sneaks in if you survive watching it unfold. Because only in bourbon collecting do grown adults treat a 12-year-old barrel like it's a family heirloom and a ticket to legend. Sometimes both at the same time. In early 2023, Oregon found itself in the middle of a bourbon scandal that sounds like it came straight out of a thriller, or a very weird office comedy. The players? Officials from the Oregon Liquor and Cannabis Commission. Yes, the very people tasked with making sure liquor is fairly distributed to the public. The crime? Using their official positions to grab the rarest bourbons for themselves. Think Pappy Van Winkle 23-year-old, the holy grail of whiskey, the unicorn nobody ever sees in the wild, except apparently these guys. These rare bourbon heists weren't exactly sneaky by criminal standards. According to the investigators, the officials directed limited bottles to stores conveniently near their agency, so they could pop in, buy them like any consumer, except, with insider knowledge. If bourbon collecting were a high-stake game of chess, they were playing 4D chess, while the rest of us were still figuring out how to spell Pappy. The public found out in February 2023, and let's just say the bourbon community didn't take it well. Governor Tina Kotek called it an abuse of position for personal gain, which in Bourbon Hunter Anonymous terms is a polite way of saying these guys treated Pappy like it was a retirement plan and not a drinkable beverage. Meanwhile, collectors online were collectively clutching their spreadsheets and calculators, realized that even in the regulated world, there are people willing to bend rules for a sip of liquid gold. By May 2024, the Oregon DOJ wrapped up the investigation. No criminal charges were filed. Apparently, it's tricky to prosecute people for being slightly too eager about bourbon. The ethics fallout, however, was real. Steve Marks, the head of the commission, resigned, and the Government Ethics Commission slapped him with a $1,500 fine, which in bourbon dollars is roughly the price of a half of a bottle of Pappy Van Winkle 23-year-old, assuming you can even find it. The lesson here? Even those who are supposed to guard the bourbon gates aren't immune to temptation. Some people will turn government office keys into golden tickets, all in the pursuit of what every bourbon hunter dreams of: a rare bottle, a bragging right, and the sweet, sweet smell of high proof power. And remember, in the world of bourbon collecting, the line between obsession, greed, and comedy is as thin as the top layer of foam on a freshly poured whiskey. In the world of bourbon collecting, high demand for rare brands like Pappy Van Winkle and Buffalo Trace releases has fueled not just friendly chats about tasty notes, but entire underground economies, digital trading corners, and sometimes outright shady deals. The secondary market, basically everywhere outside of official licensed retailers, has become a kind of modern bourbon bazaar where scarcity breeds creativity and occasionally mischief. For context, a bottle of Pappy Van Winkle that might retail for a few $100s can be seen listed online in private groups for thousands of dollars or more, because the supply is tiny and the appetite is enormous. Behind the scenes, private Facebook, Discord, and other invitation-only groups have popped up where bottles are traded under the table. Sometimes legit, sometimes not so much. Before it was shut down in 2019, one group, called Bourbon Secondary Market, BSM, had upwards of 55,000 members, actively posting rare bottles, swap deals, and resale offers at all hours. Members once joked, okay, maybe not joked, about trading a Corvette for 23 bottles of Pappy 23. A trade so wild it could have been the season finale of some bourbon-themed reality show. On the more entrepreneurial side, some collectors have used insider tips, whether it's early alerts from distributor notifications, app alerts, online rumor boards, or friends in the know, to flip bottles for thousands of dollars. This means they buy limited bottles as soon as they are allocated, then resell them in those private groups or at auctions online for prices that would make Wall Street trader blush. One member of a large secondary group described how product pricing for bottles like Weller and Handy slid dramatically over recent years as more sellers flooded the secondary market, but unicorn bottles like high-end Pappy Expressions remain coveted and valuable. The how of this market is equal parts digital and guerrilla. Deals happen through social media, DMs, private online marketplaces, and even coded posts where a simple string of emoji and abbreviation signals rare bottle available. Sometimes transactions involve meeting in person, cash exchanging hands in parking lots like something out of a film, except the MacGuffin is a bottle of 23-year bourbon rather than a briefcase of cash. Given most states don't allow alcohol to be posted and shipped freely online, this gray marketplace thrives because it's technically illegal, but hard to regulate without physical proof, licenses, or logistic trails. These secondary market practices have real, measurable consequences. For legit collectors and casual drinkers, the scramble raises prices and increases scarcity for anyone not sitting on a stash of insider alerts. It heightens tension and rival among enthusiasts. The same bottle might spark glee in one collector and gnashing of teeth in another, who is outmaneuvered online. And because so much of this happens in gray or black markets, it pushes participants into legal gray areas, where selling alcohol without a license, mislabeling bottles, or even unintentionally distributing counterfeit products becomes a risk, sometimes leading to real enforcement actions when authorities catch up with it. As I like to put it here at Bourbon Hunter Anonymous, the bourbon world isn't all cozy tasting notes and smooth pours. Sometimes it's a digital game of who can steal the rarest bottle without getting caught. Only instead of a physical bottle cap, the object desire is a login screen, a locked Facebook group, and the sweet, volatile mix of fear, greed, and that unmistakable scent of oak and competition. In the world of rare bourbon, sometimes the obsession doesn't just play out in competitive collectors groups. or heated online threads. It crosses the line to plain old criminal activity. Across the US, over the past decade, barrel thefts, warehouse break ins, and elaborate fraud schemes have shown just how far some individuals will go when the lure of a rare bottle turns into, well, a plan that looks a bit like a caper movie. One of the most notorious schemes of the last decade involved a string of warehouse thefts in the Midwest and South, where pallets of premium whiskey, yes, including Pappy Van Winkle and other high-end Buffalo Trace family releases, were stolen from storage facilities. In 2018 and 2019, multiple incidents were reported in Kentucky and surrounding states where entire racks of bottled bourbon simply disappeared. In one case, thieves drove a forklift into a storage yard late at night, loaded barrels onto a truck, and then vanished before sunrise. This left authorities, collectors, and even some distilleries scratching their heads. Multiple local news archives document these thefts as barrel heists, though. Because not every report names specific brands, the tabloids simply call it historic whiskey gone missing. It isn't only physical heists that haunt collector folklore. There have been insider fraud schemes where individuals with access to rare allocations misrepresented bottles to unsuspecting buyers or sold them through illegal channels. For example, bottle flipping once evolved into a misuse of retail receipts and mislabeling so customers believed they were getting an official allocation when they weren't. A form of fraud that turned small transactions into hundreds or even thousands of dollars in ill-gotten gains. In at least one multi-state probe in the early 2020s, authorities investigated coordinated efforts where rare bottles were sold through unofficial networks, with some sellers using fake invoices or substitute documentation to cover their tracks. These kinds of investigations sometimes span 3 or more states, drawing in state attorneys general and alcohol enforcement agents to track the money and missing liquor. And these incidents do make the news. They instantly become lore in collector rings. Rare bourbon thieves and fraudsters don't just steal bottles, they steal trust. Local news outlets in places like Louisville, Kentucky, and St. Louis, Missouri have run features on bourbon theft rings and sting operations. Not because whiskey is more important than anything else, but because these stories touch on something weirdly universal: the lengths people will go to get what they want. In many cases, once law enforcement recovers the barrels, the liquor is deemed unfit for public sale, meaning those rare bottles sometimes never see a glass again. In other cases, they simply disappear into the black market, traded quietly among collectors for years. For legit collectors, the results are real and personal. You start to wonder, who can you trust? Dealers who seemed reliable become that guy who sold that weird bottle back in 2021. Friends who showed up at a drop with extra allocations are met with raised eyebrows. And the community conversation slowly shifts from excitement about releases to nervous caution about who's buying, selling, or hoarding, and what, and how they even got it in the first place. As I like to say, some bottles vanish so completely they enter bourbon legend, ghost bottles. The stories rarely come with names or numbers, just rumors of betrayal and greed, and a lingering question: did it ever really exist, or was it just the most perfect rumor ever told? When it comes to rare bourbon, limited releases turn even those civilized enthusiasts into full-on survivalists. Take the BTAC or Pappy Van Winkle releases as prime examples. These bottles appear in tiny allocations once a year, and for many collectors, missing out isn't just disappointing, it's unthinkable. Lines form outside stores hours, sometimes days before a release, with tents, lawn chairs, and thermoses of coffee in tow. Some collectors even coordinate with insiders or trade spots in line, essentially turning bourbon drops into a quasi-Olympic sport of patience, strategy, and networking. The how of these events is a mix of meticulous planning and sheer nerve. Collectors monitor distributor emails, text alerts from liquor stores, and local forums. They compare notes on previous year's line lengths and likely store allocation numbers. When the moment finally arrives, the tension can be almost cinematic. One wrong move, like a store changing its pickup policy or another collector swooping in with a last-minute tip, can send tempers flaring. In some documented cases, collectors who had been camping for 48 hours suddenly had to race to another store across town, leaving tents, coolers, and everything else behind in a blur of bourbon-induced adrenaline. The consequences go beyond lost sleep and sore feet. Rivals flare, and what should be casual social interaction among collectors sometimes devolves into heated arguments, passive-aggressive social media posts, or even public confrontations in parking lots. The community often keeps meticulous who got what logs, tracking who walked away with the allocations, who flipped bottles on the secondary markets, and who left empty-handed. In some collector circles, bragging rights for scoring the rarest bottle are as coveted as the whiskey itself. It's not just bourbon, it's a survival game. Friends become foes, sleep becomes optional, and that coveted barrel, it might as well be the holy grail. In other words, limited releases are less about sipping and more about strategy, timing, and nerves of steel. Every campout, every inside tip, every tiny victory becomes part of the legend, the story they get to tell later while nursing their eyes after 2 nights in a folding chair and a thermos of slightly bitter coffee. In the digital age, bourbon obsession doesn't just happen in warehouses or outside liquor stores. It thrives in the glowing rectangles of our screens. Forums like Reddit, private Facebook groups, and Discord servers have become virtual hunting grounds for collectors, where the conversation ranges from casual tips to full-blown warfare over ethics, allocations, and of course, who hoards the most bottles. These aren't just polite debates over tasting notes. They're heated discussions that often spiral into what could politely be called bourbon drama, and what your therapist would call a stress test for friendships. At the heart of these online battles is the eternal debate: ethical collecting versus flipping for profit. Some collectors insist bottles should be enjoyed and shared, a liquid testament to the craft of distilling. Others see a rare bottle as a liquid asset, flipping allocations for thousands of dollars in the secondary market. The tension is palpable. Threads explode with arguments, posts are deleted and reposted, and moderators scramble to maintain order, if only briefly. Whispered tales circulate of collectors hoarding dozens, sometimes hundreds of bottles, without ever opening a single one, just to ensure bragging rights or secure a financial nest egg. In these communities, rumors spread faster than a rye on fire. Someone's stash is bigger, someone swapped bottles for favors, someone missed a release by seconds. The consequences aren't just online drama. Social fractures appear in real-life collector circles. Trust is hard-earned and easily broken. Anonymous stories. Did you hear about the guy who swapped a case of Pappy for a Corvette? Circulate like urban legends, growing more legendary with each retelling. New collectors entering the scene can't help but feel a subtle fear of missing out, an anxiety that can lead them to chase releases they wouldn't normally care about, just to avoid being left behind in the digital rat race. Somewhere online, someone is typing furiously about your unopened bottles, and yes, they might be right. In other words, bourbon collecting isn't just a hobby, it's a social ecosystem, a digital battlefield, and a psychological experiment all rolled into one. Every argument over an unopened bottle, every secret tip shared in a Discord DM, every ethical debate thread adds another layer to the mythos. It reminds us that in the modern bourbon world, obsession is only a click away. At the heart of bourbon obsession lies something far more complicated than just a taste for oak and caramel. Collectors aren't always chasing the drink itself, they're chasing the thrill of exclusivity, the intoxicating sensation of holding something almost forbidden. A rare bottle like Pappy Van Winkle 23-year or a limited Buffalo Trace Antique Collection release isn't just whiskey, it's a badge of status. A liquid trophy that signals, I'm in the inner circle. Studies of collector behavior show that scarcity amplifies desire. The rarer the item, the more we obsess over it, even when it doesn't make rational sense. In other words, the harder it is to get, the more we want it, and bourbon is no exception. This obsession can distort priorities. Suddenly, life decisions start to revolve around allocations, early lineups, or insider tips. Rational adults have been known to rearrange vacations, work schedules, and social plans just to secure a bottle. Relationships often bear the brunt of this intensity, Spouses roll their eyes at camping outside a liquor store for 48 hours. Friends clash over shared insider info. And family game nights quietly devolve into whispered negotiation about who gets the most coveted bourbon bottle at that present time. Even the most level-headed collectors find themselves making decisions they never imagined, spending thousands on a bottle they'll never open, hoarding more than they can drink, or secretly guarding allocations like precious gold. At its core, the psychology is about status, control, and the thrill of the hunt. Scarcity and exclusivity create a dopamine rush, a small but potent high that comes from being one of the few who possess something others can't. In the world of bourbon, this can warp perception. Success is then measured not in enjoyment, but in the number of rare bottles you own, the envy you inspire, and the thrill of the chase of itself. The passion that begins as a simple appreciation for craft whiskey can spiral into compulsion, a carefully calculated obsession that's equal parts fascination and folly. And yes, the fallout can be very real. Personal relationships get strained, reputations within collector circles can sour, and social trust, that invisible glue that holds communities together, becomes fragile. So, I like to remind hunters with a mix of humor and sympathy. Obsessing over bourbon isn't just about taste. Sometimes it's about power, prestige, and proving you can outwit the world, one tiny corked bottle at a time. And if that sounds a little dramatic, congrats. You've just glimpsed into the mind of a collector that has lost it. In short, the psychology of bourbon obsession is a cocktail of scarcity, desire, and human ego, with a garnish of anxiety, rivalry, and a hint of guilt, shaken, stirred, and served in a glass no one else can touch. So now you've seen it, hunters. Not just the bottles, but what they turn into. What starts as a simple pour becomes a chase. The chase becomes a ritual. And for some, the ritual becomes control, secrecy, and obsession. Bourbon isn't always just about flavor profiles and Friday night tastings. Sometimes it's about access, about status, about who knows who gets what, and who gets shut out. And once you recognize that, you'll never quite look at a limited release the same way again. So if you're out there hunting, be kind, but beware. Watch the rooms you walk into, the forums you trust, and the deals that sound just a little too perfect. Before you drift back into the daylight, do the channel a solid. Tap like, subscribe, and ring that bell like it's echoing through a quiet rickhouse. Share this with another hunter. Leave your thoughts below. And remember, here at Bourbon Hunter Anonymous, we don't just enjoy our bourbon, we expose the currents underneath it. Until next time, keep your bottles open and your circle close, and your curiosity just dangerous enough.